What's going on, people? Another Monday morning, and we actually, believe it or not, we haven't done this in so long, but Luke and I are actually reviewing a new movie. Unfortunately, as you will guys will come to find out, this is what I like to call kind of essentially the beginning of the year, where, of course, rather than just getting a new movie, which is like what we used to get, we got about 4 or 5 TV shows. We had Invincible season 3 return. We have the premiere of White Lotus season 3 last night. We're also a couple episodes of The Severance, but we're going to save that for the next couple weeks until that season is done. Because, Luke, if I'm not mistaken, you have not seen any of the show yet, or you've only seen the first season?
I have not seen any of it, but this is one of those shows that like everyone is saying it's good,
Yeah.
so it has to be that good. And how many episodes are left until the season ends?
So we're 5 episodes into this season, so we have 5 weeks left until this season is over.
That's plenty.
Yep.
To catch up.
And we've also got the premiere of season 3 of Yellowjackets and the final 5 episodes of Cobra Kai, as well as an Apple TV Plus original movie, which may have been the best thing that came out this weekend. So, yeah. So, like I said, we got a decent amount to cover. But real quick to start off, Luke, I mean, I feel bad because I feel like this is another one of those movies where people were dogpiling on it and not giving it a chance before it even could kind of pick up off the ground and gain any momentum. But then you actually watch the movie and you're wondering, you're like, man, is this just yet another kind of leftover holdover from the previous regime of Marvel movies that they kind of just had to get out there? Or like did this movie ever have a chance is my first question to kind of kick off this conversation.
I think it had a chance right after Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. If they released it like within a year of that, or like even within 2 years, like it could have been great. But they waited 4 years. All the momentum's gone. We haven't seen Sam since that show, I believe. So, and then with the obvious like 4 different versions of the movie, like a dozen writers and yeah, and you mentioned the general change of regime and
Yes.
what their plan is, like not 4 movies but 2 or 3, and not 8 TV shows but 3. So yeah, I think this one was kind of okay. We have this. Let's just send it out there and move on to Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four.
Yeah, it's so funny because this one, like, I was really trying hard to remember the timeline on this one because, again, I feel like it's been so long. Like, when was this first announced? Was it like, it was like Comic-Con 2022 or 23, I think. It's been a while, but they announced this quite a while ago where, again, this was originally going to be, I believe this was originally conceived as potentially a second season for Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then because of the lukewarm reaction to that, they reconceived of it as a movie. And then, like you were saying, numerous rewrites, numerous reshoots. The fact that the Serpent Society was going to be the original villains, and then they reshot it when that was not doing well, kind of reconceived it. Shira Haas's character, Ruth Bat Saraf, was originally supposed to be an Israeli superhero. They retooled that for obvious reasons. Then they kind of stripped and basically essentially returned it into, and this is probably my biggest problem with this movie, they basically turned it into more of a sequel to The Incredible Hulk that happens to feature Sam Wilson's new Captain America, previously the Falcon, as well as the adamantium, the source of adamantium, which is now the Celestial Tiamat, who, again, has not been mentioned or referenced since Eternals 4 years ago, since Eternals came out. So this movie
doesn't feel like 4 years ago.
I know. I know. It feels like it's been 10 years since that movie came out. But yeah, all of that is to say it all kind of results in a movie that really, I can't even say that this goes into the whole, not for anyone kind of a movie while trying to satisfy everyone, because this movie really does just feel, of all the Marvel movies, like really just a mishmash. Because say what you will about, I would say, probably the 2 weakest efforts that we've had so far in this new post-Endgame phase, which I don't know if you feel the same way, but for me, I think of 2 efforts to summarize the failings of Marvel of the last few years. It's of movies specifically, not shows. Shows, it's a different story, especially since they've, previously at the start of the post-COVID regime, they were like very much making the shows tied in. At least they were trying to, and now they're gone completely the opposite route. They're very much disconnected. Echo, Agatha, some of their more recent efforts, we'll see how closely they tie in as well. Loki, they wrapped up Secret Invasion was mostly a failure. But for me, the two biggest sources of failure for Marvel recently have been Ant-Man Quantumania and the third one and the Marvels. But the Marvels, it was a thing of where everybody kind of knew that movie was doomed, so they basically did whatever they could in order to kind of get it out, and it still flopped. Quantumania, they legitimately thought they had a hit on their hands. They thought, in the old regime when it was going to be Kang as the first main villain before they kind of retooled it in order to aim it more so towards Doctor Doom. They were at least you could see that they were at least taking a risk. They were going in an opposite direction. The Quantumania, at the very least, tone wise, wasn't like the first two Ant-Man movies. So, even though the movie failed, this is the thing that I've been seeing kind of across all online is that you could at the very least see like the risks and the different direction that they were trying to go in, that the risks that they were trying to take. Versus this one, aside from the fact that the movie is bad and the movie is reshot multiple times and feels like more like an early effort from DC post Man of Steel rather than what we've come to expect from Marvel, it feels like just plot-wise, there wasn't much there. It feels like everything that they were trying to accomplish with Sam Wilson, they accomplished in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So not only is this a messy movie, it feels hacksawed to death. Certain sequences feel like they don't even mesh up from like a consistent storyline wise. It just, you don't even really know or understand what this movie's about, what this movie's trying to accomplish, even within the context of the greater MCU. Which is, I guess, something that even as bad as the previous efforts were, you can kind of always understand, they were either new introductory pieces like Shang-Chi or Eternals, or they were like kind of trying to continue with these legacy heroes in this new iteration, post Thanos, post Downey as Iron Man, post Evans as Captain America. So you could at the very least, like, even if the efforts didn't work, you could see where they were going and what they were trying to accomplish, even if you didn't quite see the whole end game, because that's the thing that I'll also kind of always cut them some slack for, is the sense that they were still trying. You needed to give them time in order to build up to their new story. And now, you've seen where they've kind of gone. Their efforts have kind of gotten progressively worse and worse, with the exception of what I call the one good Marvel effort per year. I'm still stuck by this. We get one good Marvel effort per year. We had No Way Home in 21, Wakanda Forever in 22, which I'll still stand by, Guardians 3 in 23, and then literally to the point where they knew it was going to be a hit. So then they made it the only movie that they released last year, Deadpool and Wolverine, which even that movie kind of still felt, even though it was bringing Deadpool into the mainstream MCU, that movie still felt largely disconnected and more of an homage to the whole Fox universe.
And they had Loki season 2
and Loki
last year, which was like it's the best Disney Plus show they've made at Marvel Studios.
Only problem now is that one we're coming up on almost 2 years since that one, because that was October of 23. But yeah. Exactly.
Oh wait, that was 20.
That was 2023. Yeah, the only TV shows, live action TV shows we got last year were Echo in January and Agatha all along.
Look, I didn't watch those. I'm getting my timelines messed up.
Yeah, I did not watch either of those. I unfortunately watched both Secret Invasion and Loki, which was good, but Secret Invasion really, I think, put the kibosh on having any motivation to watch any of the TV shows. I watched
that one through Twitter reactions. I had a great time watching it through that. It's like Emilia Clarke has all the DNAs now.
You spared yourself is all that I'm going to say. Yeah, she has all the DNA. Exactly. Take that line out of context. But yeah, I'm going to need to hear some really, really good things about Ironheart and Wonder Man when those two come out this year. I mean, I'm more inclined to watch Wonder Man because Yahya Abdul and, and they're doing like kind of like a meta twist with that as well. But Ironheart, especially after her introduction to Wakanda Forever, I'm just like, man, I have like absolutely zero impetus to want to watch this movie, like at all. Or this show.
All hopes on Daredevil, Born Again.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're already shooting season 2, so it's an actual show.
Yes. Yes.
Like the first one of the Disney Plus.
Well, remember, that was part of the big, and Daredevil, I guess you could kind of make the argument, was kind of the start of this, but that was the whole big, kind of change in Marvel's approach to how they were shooting their TV shows. Because that's the thing, they were shooting their TV shows like 6-part movies, which is what a lot of people had problems with ultimately. And with Daredevil, the approach really shifted to become, no, let's shoot this like an actual show. And that, again, was one of the first things to kind of, be retooled under the change in Marvel regime, because they took one look at the old version of the show when they didn't have Karen and Focky, when they were trying to make it more of a reboot rather than a continuation of the Netflix show. and they were like, yeah, let's just retool this and make this a continuation of the Netflix show. So yeah, like I said, like you were saying, all hopes are on Daredevil. Movie-wise, I do still have hope for Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. Thunderbolts, at the very least, even if it sucks, it's got a low enough budget that and it opens in the Marvel sweet spot, as I call it, in May, that it should, at the very least, be able to get some money back. And Fantastic Four, I think, is too big of a legacy title. Plus, now that July is kind of shaping up to be more of like an event movie month between Jurassic World, Superman, and now Fantastic Four, or all opening up a week apart. That at the very least should hopefully get some impetus. Plus, the style and the look of that movie is so different, I feel like, than any of Marvel's previous efforts.
Yeah, and they're really pushing that marketing.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen IMAX countdowns be Fantastic Four themed before this movie, so
yeah.
I can only expect that to ramp up. Like, you know, maybe even tease Doom in the next trailer. Like,
yes.
that'll get people
exactly
people
like the minute that they start, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they say that for the third trailer, not the second one. But the minute that you see Robert Downey Jr. in one of those trailers,
I think we'll hear him. I don't know if we'll see him.
You're right, because obviously, again, they want to differentiate. They're like, yeah, this is not Tony Stark. So, like, they want to set up for that moment in Doomsday that's going to happen when Holland is fighting Dr. Doom and the mask comes off and he's like, Mr. Stark? But they're definitely setting up for that moment.
Have you seen the reports of, like, Tom Holland's going to be busy with the Odyssey and Spider-Man, so he's going to be masked for most of Doomsday?
I have heard that, and that makes sense. For a second,
I think that could be really good, just like a full appearance with only masked.
And if anything, it could benefit the direction of his character because, like, he
no one knows him.
No Way Home. Yeah, nobody knows who he is anymore. So there's that. So do you want to even try and break down what this movie is about? Because for the life of me, that's the other thing too. It's a shorter Marvel movie too. It clocks in at less than 2 hours, and for the life of me, I'm still having a hard time remembering the plot. Like, man, even these Marvel plots are going to become a little bit too much for me.
I think it's a Frankenstein's monster of a plot. I think.
Oh my god, yeah. Basically,
probably the original idea was Serpent Society,
right?
Like Giancarlo Esposito, I think.
Right.
One WWE wrestler. What's his name?
Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins.
Yeah, he was going to be in it.
And Rosa Salazar was going to be a member of the squad as well.
Yeah.
I
imagine that was the logical continuation of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Then maybe they figured, oh, right, the big celestial in the ocean. We got to acknowledge that somewhere.
Right.
Throw it into Captain America.
Well, if memory serves, I'm pretty sure that was always the plan. At the very least, some component of the original screenplay always involved Tiamat, the Celestial from Brave New World, being the source of adamantium. And like, that was their big thing. Like, they were trying to, but my source of confusion was, I'm like, okay, you're going to just set up adamantium and have no mention of the X-Men or the mutants, like, at all. So that was always kind of like, because they're trying to build and set up to X-Men just as much as they were Fantastic Four in the past. So that's one thing. Then
the Hulk.
Yes.
Somehow.
Then you have
the Red Hulk.
Then when they decide to scrap Serpent Society, I don't know if the plan was always to have Thunderbolt Ross become Red Hulk in this movie, but they basically decided, oh, we're gonna factor in Red Hulk. Let's just try and essentially bring back the plot lines from Incredible Hulk. And I like and kind of sort of respect that. And I'll say that part of the movie was still better than anything that we got in She-Hulk, because I know there was also an original version of this movie where Sam Wilson was going to start to assemble the Avengers, and one of them was going to be She-Hulk. But then after the reception to that movie, to that show, everybody was like, yeah, no, we're not bringing her in at all. But so this was a movie where you were essentially supposed to be having Sam Wilson being tasked by Thunderbolt Ross within some capacity to reassemble the Avengers. And also there was going to be a series of international incidents that may or may not have involved the Serpent Society, also involving the Tiamat Island that was going to be the source of adamantium. And what you get in the final version of the movie is the Serpent Society led by Giancarlo Esposito, Seth Volker, aka Sidewinder, who, again, was added in reshoots, as he very much added, and it very much so looks like it, because some of those scenes are shot, and you're like, was Giancarlo Esposito with anybody else in these movies, like, as far as how the editing? Like, we've seen enough of these where we can kind of tell where the editing goes, at least as far as how his creative editing is used to introduce new characters in the third act, and end up being the impetus of the movie ends up being that Thunderbolt Ross is attempting to sign up to forge ahead a peace treaty with Japan in order to divvy up, even quantities of the Celestial Island.
It's only like 4 countries. It's India, France, and
Japan, which is
like only
weird.
Those 3.
It's like, why are only those 3 wanting it? Like, China's not trying to get involved in this at all. Oh, but of course,
come on, Dom. This is too political.
I know. This is getting way too political.
This isn't the Winter Soldier. We can't afford that.
I know. I know, literally, but it's almost like, oh, they were trying to make it's all literally like, oh, they were trying to make a political movie, and then they were like, oh, wait, we can't make a political movie, and it's like, but that was going to be the whole movie. Oh man, and it's funny too because I'm pretty sure also they were originally wanted the Serpent Society in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm pretty sure they were supposed to be the bad guys that originally before they replaced them for the Flag Smashers. So the Serpent Society has just been shuffled off the board like multiple times. But it's funny because I'm like, if you look at the Serpent Society, you're like, yeah, they're from the comics. You're like, yeah, they're not exactly these like high functioning, terrorist super spy villains that you would normally expect of something like a Hydra or like Zemo in Civil War, which is very much what this movie is trying to emulate. So essentially what you end up getting is you have a movie where Thunderbolt Ross is being sabotaged on all ends in an attempt to forge a peace treaty by the leader, who is back after 16 years and wanting revenge. Tim Blake Nelson's character from The Incredible Hulk. They hinted at the end of that movie 16 years ago that the drop of Abomination's blood...
17 now.
17 now, exactly. That the drop of Abomination's blood, turned him into the leader. And the other bit as well, again, when it was supposed to be William, that was kind of continued when it was still supposed to be William Hurt. It's funny, actually, because I was having this conversation with my brother, where my brother was like, I don't get why they brought in Harrison Ford. I was like, didn't they already have somebody as Thunderbolt Ross? I'm like, yeah, William Hurt, the original actor, died. He was like, what? He didn't even know that William Hurt had died. Like, so that's another thing that I wonder, like, how many people will be consciously aware of, because, again, William Hurt, his portrayal of Thunderbolt Ross was kind of an unintentionally important characteristic of the latter couple of Phase 3 of Marvel movies, because they brought him back from Incredible Hulk to kind of be the catalyst for Civil War, in terms of he's the one who passes the Sokovia Accords that splits up the Avengers in the first place until they reunite to stop Thanos. And so you could argue that he's even more the villain in that movie than Baron Zemo is. And now he's back. He's played by Harrison Ford. He's attempting to get Sam Wilson to put the Avengers back together, while at the same time trying to assemble this treaty, while also being blackmailed by the leader. So you could also argue that this is just as much of a Thunderbolt Ross movie as it is the Captain America movie. Again, you really could make the argument that Sam Wilson is not the main character of this movie, which is yet another problem.
He definitely doesn't feel like it. Like,
because the movie is called Captain America.
Screen time. Yeah, like, come on.
Yeah. So you got him and his new sidekick, Joaquin, who, again, not a fan of at all. Like, they introduced him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I'm like, who is this?
I didn't mind him. He was like he's better than other MCU comic relief.
Yeah, and they also bring back Isaiah Bradley from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and after going out of their way to make him be like, oh, he was the forgotten Captain America, he was locked up and experimented on, and of course it's the new Marvel, right? So they're already trying to make jokes about that when they were trying to be all serious about it in Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then he's literally just used as a plot device where he is mind controlled into attempting to assassinate Thunderbolt Ross, fails, and then is locked up in jail. And the whole movie is Sam just trying to prove his innocence and get him out of jail. But then multiple times throughout the movie, Thunderbolt Ross states that, oh, he knows that Bradley's innocent. And I'm like, so why did you let him out of jail? If you know he's innocent, then... So that's already one of several problems. And like I said, the whole movie is building up to the reveal that... Again, I think this is... I know I've listed off a lot, but the whole movie is building up to the reveal that Thaddeus Ross, Thunderbolt Ross, is a Hulk, is the Red Hulk. A reveal which they tell us not only in the trailers, but in the marketing. So it's like, okay, so we already know that this is how this movie is going to end. So why do we care?
And there's really nothing to spoil in the movie. I'm like,
right.
Everyone's posting no spoilers. I'm like, there's nothing to spoil.
Yeah, there's nothing to spoil. The trailers have told you literally everything that's going to happen. Aside from like holding back on the leader, and I will say they were kind of ambiguous as far as whether Giancarlo Esposito would be the main villain or not, because a lot of the because I will give them credit for this, you don't see any full body shots of the leader in the trailer. You only hear the voice, and again, you would have to recognize the voice because, Tim Blake Nelson's not exactly that big of a character reveal. But like I said, so the whole thing is that, again, Thunderbolt Ross, as you know from Civil War, had a heart attack and was dying, went to the leader to help save him. The leader obviously gave him these gamma-infused pills that kept him alive, but in the process made him a Hulk. So, yeah, that's really it. And then at the end, after his whole meltdown, also the way that they finally turned him into a Red Hulk is really dumb, because the first time that he almost hulks out would have been way more interesting when he's on the ship. Like,
this isn't going to happen, but how cool would it be if it did happen?
How cool would it be? Exactly. And that's the problem, because, again, the trailers rob us of any sort of actual drama that could be in this movie. Instead, again, we just see a couple of cool action sequences which the editing ruins. It makes it impossible to actually enjoy. And the rest is a bunch of really predictable plot beats that really don't give the main character anything interesting to do. And again, relegates this to again, a side plots and a sequel to us, and essentially a sequel to a movie that came out 16 years ago. So the movie doesn't work as a Hulk sequel. It kind of gets Black Widowed that way. It doesn't work as a Captain America movie. It really doesn't work as a Marvel movie because, again, of the inconsistent beats all around. Like, and I even mentioned the whole how they basically have to retool the Israeli superhero that they were originally going to do into a Black Widow character.
Who she still has like
jokes,
the
but she still has the costume,
thing.
Exactly.
Like, why is she just wearing it with like a jacket over it? Like,
I'm like, all of your
CG.
Like, after the fact, you torture these poor CG artists with this awful looking CG.
I looked at the credits for once. Like, okay, and the VFX one took like 5 minutes to scroll by. I'm like, oh,
exactly.
Man,
and
these poor people, they don't get paid enough.
And you couldn't bother to like digitally tool out the blue costume and turn that into a Black Widow costume. That would have taken too long. But the Red Hulk, who still looks like shit, by the way. Like, they really put all their effort into that. Like, I'm sorry.
I think it looks good.
That whole third act battle, I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that like I've seen so many of these movies now that the effects are really starting to show their ugly hand. But yeah, like I saw that and I was just like, ooh, that whole last act. And like, you didn't really get to see any of the thing that like makes Red Hulk. You didn't really get to see any of the fire. It's just like, oh, he's a Hulk who's red. That's really it. So you didn't get any of that cool stuff. And yeah, also again, the fact that I'm supposed to expect Sam Wilson, a man who has no super soldier serum, vibranium coated wings, and and the vibranium shield, and he's expected to last one-on-one in a battle with a Hulk and survive. Like, there's a reason why Thor was the only one that could... Thor or Tony Stark in the Hulkbuster uniform, in the Hulkbuster armor, were the only ones that could withstand a battle against the Hulk in the old days. You never saw Cap, you never saw Widow or Hawkeye, you never saw any of them trying to take down the Hulk because they knew better. And that was part of what made the Marvel of old good, is the fact that they kind of understood some of the more less believable parts of the comics and chose to exclude those. And now they're just like, yeah, fuck it, we're just gonna have Falcon fight the Red Hulk. And
I think having the Red Hulk as the villain for a Captain America movie, it just doesn't really make sense. Like, I'm not really familiar with him in the comics, but look at the first three movies. You have Red Skull, like iconic Captain America villain from the comics. Second movie, Bucky, like big emotional connection there. The third movie, Civil War, like that self-explanatory. And you had Zemo in there, which is like a probably A tier, S tier.
Right. And Thunderbolt Ross. Like, that movie balanced multiple antagonists really well.
And this one, it's like, go, Gus Fring. Because they make him do the Gus Fring again. Like, he doesn't even get to do anything.
You didn't understand. He's contractually obligated to do that for the rest of his career. He's never going to be allowed to actually act ever again, at least in a Disney production.
Yeah, and you have the leader pulling the strings. Like, I thought he looked great. Like, he's just really just the whole brain thing.
Well, he even mentioned that he's like, he asked them to do practical effects, not CG. Yeah. So that's why it actually looks good.
So him, Esposito, and Thunderbolt Ross, like, three of them, and you don't give either of them enough development to be compelling. And
I mean, I'll give them credit. They tried with the leader, because the leader was like, Ross made promises that he didn't deliver. He kind of engineered it so that like I would end up this way permanently, and then he made promises. I kept him alive, and then engineered certain things politically to make sure that he would become president, all in exchange for a pardon. Which, in the back of my mind, I was like, dude, you're trusting Thunderbolt Ross with this, as they call him, the Hulk Hunter in the movie. And you call yourself this super smart leader. That's on you, my dude. But
you can see the future. He can see the other worlds.
Oh, see, I didn't even stick around for the post-credit scene because I'm like, because you already told me what it was going to be, and I'm like, I've already suffered enough through this movie. It's so funny too, because like I felt bad because there was this dad and daughter combo next to us that you could tell we're like really, really excited to watch it, and we're really having a good time with it. And I was just sitting there trying to contain myself, being like, don't ruin this for them, don't ruin this for them, But there were a couple moments where like I just could not help myself. Like, I audibly chuckled, like the scene with Harrison Ford with the fake-looking mustache, wearing the fakest looking mustache.
I laughed at that too. It's like, yes, they gave him a mustache.
Hard at that. I was like, oh man. And then they even made a joke about it later on in the movie where they were like, lose the mustache or lose the election. I'm like, all right. So at the very least, they knew They knew.
To mention the start, like they don't even have the Marvel Studios intro. Like,
Right, they have the
what's
like
that
the
about?
yeah,
Are they
I don't
trying
know.
to be edgy or something? Like
I
you
don't
built
know.
your brand on this
I
for
don't know what's
20
going on
years.
with that, but I was like, man, I was so ready for that too.
That's an
Uh,
essential part. Of
yes,
did the editors just forget to put it in?
I don't
Like,
know. I don't know,
I wouldn't
but
be surprised.
yeah, overall, not a good movie. Also, again, the fact that this came out in Black History Month, and again, I'm just thinking about like, wow, this is the same slot that Black Panther and Captain Marvel opened in 6 and 7 years ago, respectively. First of all, I can't believe that it's been 6 and 7 years since those movies opened, respectively. But also, same as well about Captain Marvel, that movie still grossed $1 billion because people were that hyped for Endgame. And Black Panther, yeah, is still a cultural phenomenon. So yeah, it's just really sad to see how far we've fallen in the February time slot. You know, there are other Marvel movies that are scheduled to come out in 2026 besides there's still a February release slot for a Marvel movie, as well as
I don't
two
see
other
that happening because
yeah, I
we
don't
have
see
no
that happening.
news of anything.
Yeah,
Like there
no.
was a Scarlet Witch movie rumor, but
Yeah.
there's nothing being
I
reported
don't
on
think
that.
that's
So
happening. Yeah, the only other thing that we know that's coming besides the next 3 movies after this year, which are Doomsday, Spider-Man 4, and then Secret Wars. Yeah, I think the only other one that they're going to save is X-Men, but they're going to save that for after Secret Wars. If, like honestly, if Marvel wants to really really renew faith in their brand after the last couple of years, they should make X-Men the first movie that comes out after Secret Wars. That's what I would do personally. Like you could try and squeeze it in before Secret Wars, but I don't think that would be the best. I think that you need Secret Wars, reset the universe, and then unlike what they did with Endgame, where they were like, okay, we're just gonna continue on with all these side characters from the original MCU instead of introducing Fantastic Four and X-Men, who we want. They should like just go right into X-Men. They're like, okay, we got Fantastic Four. They're going to play crucial parts in a Doomsday and Secret Wars. Now let's just move right onto X-Men. Let's only focus on them, and then we can come back to whatever else we want to do. You know, whoever is left standing after Secret Wars, which
yeah.
who knows who will be left standing. You know, so because the other thing too also is I don't know if they're going to try and push out Doctor Strange 3 or Thor 5 before Doomsday and Secret Wars. I don't think they
You
will.
think
Not
they
at this
delay
point.
either of them?
Hmm.
I think they delay Secret Wars. I don't
Oh,
think
you think? Oh,
because I think they'll churn out Doomsday because they have to.
they'll churn out Doomsday, yeah. Well, because they're shooting them back to back, like just like they did with Infinity War and Endgame. So I don't know if they want to risk pushing Secret Wars because
Maybe.
remember, obviously, again in hindsight, nobody could have told us, but them putting out Endgame only a year after Infinity War ended up helping them tremendously because if they'd pushed that even a little bit, you know, COVID would happen. Obviously, again, different time and space, but yeah,
I
you know,
just don't have any faith in Doomsday being coherent
there's
and
no
good.
way it's going to.
Yeah,
There's way too many characters, and there's no sort of unifying plot lines that will like kind
and
of
there's like, hardly any build up to
yeah.
it.
It's gonna have to be like a Fantastic Four sequel for the most of it, and then it's gonna end obviously with the lead up into Secret Wars with like some sort of incursion event that Doom causes, the world smashing together, creating Battle World, and you'll see a scene with him, Strange, and Molecule Man. Like Doomsday and Secret Wars are really gonna be dependent on more than anything else. On people's familiarity with the 2015 Secret Wars comics. That's really going to be, and thankfully I've read that comic line, so I know how that storyline goes. But yeah, it's going to be a mess to say the least. Like this whole multiverse saga thing, it's just been miss after miss after miss. The only ones that have worked have really been the ones that have kind of worked as, like I said, those ones I listed off. They've kind of been like codas and homages to the MCU of old. You know, No Way Home was an homage to Spider-Man's entire history. Wakanda Forever was our way of saying goodbye to Chadwick. Guardians 3 was the wrap-up of Gunn's time within the MCU. And then Deadpool was an homage to the whole Fox universe. Like, there's a reason why those have been the only good MCU efforts, and everything else has kind of just been mediocre and meh. So, overall, yeah, Brave New World, another flop in Marvel's most recent chain of flops. What do you give this one?
I don't know. I think I'm like a Marvel movie would like seriously have to offend me for me to give it like a really low rating. Like you know, I'm more generous
Yes, you
rater
are.
of movies. So I'd probably give it like a 2.5 because I didn't hate it. I'm like okay,
Right.
I liked some stuff. I liked the dogfight. I didn't mind the fight at the end, but I'm just gonna forget it all.
Right.
On rewatch, you know, I'll probably drop, but you know, I'm looking forward to Thunderbolts. Like
Yes, I am looking forward to
we
Thunderbolts.
both really love Beef. It's the guys behind that.
Yes.
Great cast. Bucky, who shows up in this for one
Yes,
scene,
for one scene, which was
a decent scene. No, I don't
Not
know.
a fan. Not a fan.
Not a fan.
Well,
Okay,
because it got ruined by the whole
it
Sam
did
being
get
like,
ruined. Like,
yeah, oh, did your speechwriters come up with that? Like the reveal of him running for
yeah,
Congress. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then Ruth Bat Saroff comes in. He's like, oh, wow, what a beefcake that is. And Sam's like, he's over 100 years old. I was like, oh, great. Okay. So we have to
yeah.
ruin like the one competent character in this whole movie.
But let's just move on to Thunderbolts and
Yeah.
Fantastic Four, which we
Exactly.
both have
Let's
faith in.
let's forget about this movie the way that Marvel clearly wanted us to, because I'm sorry, there's no way in hell Marvel again. Julius Ono, the director, I feel so bad for that guy because they clearly so obviously fired him midway through production and
'Cause
reshot the movie without
I
him.
saw a quote like that there weren't that many reshoots. Well, maybe you weren't there.
Maybe
but,
you weren't there for that many reshoots.
but
That's because your ass got Gareth Edwards. So yeah. All right. So
rolled in the cleanup crew. I'm sure they have they must have a designated team for reshoots. Just like
well, yeah,
as Feige orders.
Well, they factor reshoots into all of their budgets, but they've just been becoming more and more obvious recently. So, all right. So, like I said, we got a couple of TV shows that I want to run through beforehand. So I want to start off with one that it's funny. You said that you tried watching and you were not a fan of, but I want to make the case. I want to make the case for Yellowjackets. So. I mean, well, this factors in because we're coming back to talking Lost next week. Season 2, we're kicking off with next week. So, Yellowjackets, right? You famously said that you could not get into this show because remind me again, you tried watching the show like right before we started watching Lost, and you were like, yeah, well, you weren't a fan.
I tried it like way back when, like we hadn't even talked about Lost as a project,
right.
and I didn't get into it then. But I thought, okay, I like Lost. This is kind of like Lost. I'm gonna try again, and
you just
I made it like maybe 2 episodes further, and I said no, I don't care about these characters.
Yeah, the thing that I give this show credit for is that again, it is very very much trying to be like Lost. But the biggest problem that this show commits is basically blatantly telling us like, oh, it's supernatural. But then the rest of the show is kind of like, oh, but like, is it real or not? Even though like, so like, I guess the biggest difference with Lost is Lost, you didn't know if the things that you were seeing on the island were actually happening or if it was all in the characters' heads. Yellowjackets, they basically are going out of the way to be like, no, everything that's happening is like very supernaturally based, but like, it's also one of those things where it's trying to be more metaphorical. So rather than just being about survival, right? Because the thing that's interesting about the structure of the show is rather than following the before and showing how the characters got to kind of this isolated spot. You know, for those of you who haven't seen the show, like I said, the show just aired its 3rd season this past weekend. It's about a girls' soccer team in the mid-90s who gets in a plane crash stranded in the middle of the Canadian wilderness. Nobody's coming to save them, while also following their future selves, the survivors of the crash. And it's very heavily hinted at that they became cannibals, but that there was a supernatural reasoning for it because of where they landed. This kind of weird antlered, like kind of wood carving that they discovered and all that. And it follows primarily 4 of the survivors. Shauna, portrayed by Melanie Linsky, Ty, portrayed by Tawny Cypress, Natalie, portrayed by Juliette Lewis, and Misty, portrayed by Christina Ricci, and all the various supporting characters. You've also have Shauna's husband and daughter as well in the current timeline. Also, you have Elijah Wood, who comes in season 2 as a fellow detective who's also kind of investigating stuff that's going on with the girls. Basically, like I said, in the present storylines, there's always hints as far as like, oh, people discovering what they did when they were stranded in the wilderness. And so that kind of becomes less compelling as time goes on. Although in this most recent season, if memory serves, it basically became a thing of where it's like, oh, they're the kind of whatever the supernatural thing was that they encountered in the woods, which they still haven't told you what it is. It kind of followed them back and is still pursuing them as adults. So that's kind of like what the show comes down to. And it's one of those things where I'm always compelled while I'm watching it because the acting is good enough, particularly from Christina Ricci and Juliette Lewis. Those two are kind of like the reasons to watch the show. And Melanie Linsky as well does get better as time goes on. But it's one of those things where the divide between storylines is becoming more and more apparent because while everything going on in the past with the girls as teenagers is pretty interesting, the stuff that's where you're following them as adults, kind of essentially trying to like still interact with society. I'm still they're still, I feel like, kind of trying to find their footing there. So I haven't gotten a chance to watch the 2 new episodes of season 3 yet. I'm going to, but like I said, I am trying to make the case as far as there may be something here that does differentiate it a little bit from Lost. It's not just another straight up Lost knockoff where they're just like blatantly utilizing storylines from Lost, like The 100 or Arrow or something like that. So that's kind of my case for Yellow Jackets. Again, it's not the best show, and season 2 for me answered a little bit, but for me, still, again, the overall like kind of presence of season 1 is really overhanging. But for me, like with most shows, season 3 is going to be the make or break season, because the show is still kind of trying to figure out its footing. So whether or not they'll actually be able to kind of really hit their stride with this season, that will be yet to be determined. And then this will be one of those where I'll look back on this podcast and see either, man, I was so wrong, or man, I was so right, is all that I'm going to say. I have a feeling that I'm going to probably be more on the wrong side, because that's just how these things usually go for me. But yeah, so that's Yellow Jackets. Did any of what I just said convince you to watch this show at all?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I'm far more interested in the younger storyline. Like, I have a hard time caring about what's happening to them after. I'm just more interested in the wilderness aspect. We're lost. It's like,
you're right.
It's kind of both. Like, how did they get there? How do they relate to each other? And that one is like, okay, like what? Like, I know you ate one of them. Like, I know you ate Ella Purnell. Like, okay, what happened outside of that? Like,
exactly.
What led to that?
And they're still kind of doing that. And it's, you're right. It's the story. The more, you're 100% right. The more I think about it, the storytelling decision to not to follow them, because you got obviously only like kind of one sequence that leads up to the crash directly, but the decision to follow them as adults and kind of how this is still following them throughout their life. There was a way I feel like that you could have made that interesting, and I think they handled that pretty well for the most part in the first season. And the second season is where it starts to get a little bit off the rails. And like I said, I'm going to be interested to see kind of where they go, especially after how season 2 ended. So as this is, I know also that there was an episode from season 2 that got cut. So there was only 9 episodes as well. So it was left up feeling a little bit incomplete as well. So yeah. So Yellow Jacket season 3 airing right now. You also have the premieres of Invincible season 3, which again, this is just more fun, right? It was season 2. Season 1 was one of the breakout phenomenons of COVID. Season 2 was great. Ended with Mark fighting Angstrom Levi, portrayed by Sterling K. Brown, and brutally murdering him, and also being in an alternate future with Eve. We're 4 episodes into this new season because Amazon not only was able to actually like complete the entire season this time, but also is releasing it in the boys kind of scheduled strategy. We're releasing the first 3 episodes and then the next 5 after that. So we're 4 episodes in, and already things are getting interesting. Mark is officially with Eve. His little brother Oliver, who was introduced last season, is starting to get his powers and is already starting to show he may have more of a sadistic side than Mark did. And you also have Nolan and Alan trapped in space, starting to escape and planning their kind of planning to have Nolan join the rebellion against the Viltrumite Empire. So we're still no close to having the Viltrumite War, but things are moving in a progressively interesting direction as well. So have you seen any of this season of Invincible?
I watched the first episode. It was, it is good. It's Invincible.
Exactly.
Like the story is finished, so they just have to bring it to the screen.
Right.
I'm not really familiar with the rest of it. I'm not going to spoil myself unless I get my hands on the compendium, which are like 80 euros each. I'm like, okay,
right. Yeah,
I'm good. I'll just watch the show.
Yeah, I'm good with watching the show because from what I've heard, they've stuck pretty closely to the comics as well. So like they're not differentiating too much. Like Robert Kirkman, again, is the creator of the comic, is also very heavily involved in the creation of the show. So yeah, that's one where again I'll just watch the show in order to, because that's something tells me that they're gonna be able to finish this pretty faithfully. How many seasons do you see this having?
I heard that it was planned for like 6 to 7 or 8.
Yeah,
like that's about the length of.
Yeah, that sounds about right, because we know Kirkman loves those long run. We know Kirkman loves those long running stories.
He's a Walking Dead man.
Yep, exactly. Right? Yeah, he's the guy who created The Walking Dead. But hopefully, now since the episodes are forced to, be shrunk, we won't be stuck with the episodes worth of filler that we were unfortunately tortured with year after year after year while watching Walking Dead. There's a reason why, again, I would tune out of that show for entire seasons until they would get to moments from the comics that I liked. And then afterwards, I'm like, okay, I'm tuned out again. Like after they were finished with Negan, I'm like, oh, it's just the whispers. And then that's really it. There's really nothing else. And I think they had like just finally wrapped the Walking Dead comic around that time. But I'm like, oh, but they're removing Rick from the last 2 seasons. I'm like, oh, why do I care? So that kind of was, was more of a reason for me to not watch Walking Dead. But I love Invincible. It hasn't disappointed me yet. I didn't like the split that they did with the last season, but Unfortunately, it resulted in us being able to get the third season, all the episodes at once. So it's continuing to be good, solid, consistent. The voice cast is still great. Again, Stephen Yeun, Julian Jacobs, Sandra Oh, Walton Goggins in his 18th project. Like, Walton Goggins is in 3 projects so far this year. He's in this. He's in White Lotus season 3, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then, of course, the final season of The Righteous Gemstones when that premieres in a couple of weeks as well. Like, the man does not stop working. And I'm watching him on Justified as well. Yeah, Walton Goggins, he's the best. He's consistently great.
And he's about to do Fallout season 2.
And he's about to do Fallout, and they're working on Fallout season 2 right now. Exactly. So, again, all I say is let the man cook because he hasn't disappointed me yet. All right, now, oh man, this is a big one too. Final 5 episodes of Cobra Kai season 6. Man,
I need to catch up.
This was a staple of the Talkin TV podcast of old. I feel like, again, the 2 shows that like kind of, really united us were Stranger Things and Cobra Kai. And while I cannot say that I was a fan of the decision to split the last season into 3 parts. 2 parts already is egregious enough, and I hated that Netflix was doing that. But to split the last 3 into 3 parts of 5 episodes, the first 2 batches aired in July and November of last year, respectively. And now we have the final 5 episodes. I've seen 2 of them. I'm spacing them out. I'm taking my time with this because I do not want to rush kind of the show that I've ultimately spent, again, 5 years with, because this show really came to us during COVID was when we really started watching it, right when they made the announcement that they were going to switch from YouTube Premium over to Netflix.
It wasn't even YouTube Premium, it was YouTube Red.
YouTube Red, exactly. They dropped.
Does that even exist anymore?
No, it's done. They shuttered that. That's part of the reason why the show went to Netflix, because Netflix saw a golden opportunity there. And they aired seasons 3 and 4 in January 1st and December 31st of 2021, respectively, which is why 2021 was kind of like the year of Cobra Kai. I caught up on the first 2 seasons during COVID. And then, yeah, it's just been a matter of waiting for the last season. Season 5 was in September of 2022. So it had been a while since we had Cobra Kai before this final season aired, and now they kind of split it into, again, these kind of 3 acts. And the thing that impressed me the most was how these 5 episodes really kind of all had their own individual kind of like parts of the story, where, again, they're all kind of revolving around this big tournament that they'd been hinting at for a couple seasons out, the Sekai Tekai International Tournament, in order to try and bring some real legitimacy to Cobra Kai. Part 1 was the setup, them training for it, all the, typical revelations, betrayals. Tori ends up going back to Kreese. Part 2, they go to Barcelona, in order to compete in the tournament. Silver is revealed to still be around. He's bankrolling a new team, consisting of Axel and Zara, who are 2 of the new antagonists. And, of course, like everything Cobra Kai related, the tournament devolves into complete chaos. It results in one of the new fighters that Kreese brings over from Cobra Kai being killed. So now we're on part 3, and it kind of shows the fallout from that, but you can tell that things are really starting to wrap up. Johnny is about to welcome a new child into the world with Miguel's mom, Carmen. Daniel is grappling with the fallout and whether or not he should, resume the Sekai Tekai, and it's down to Silver, of all people, to convince everybody else, of course, to recompete in the Sekai Tekai. So now everybody is kind of getting ready for their final fight. You can tell that Miguel and Robbie are getting ready to go head-to-head with Axel. Tori is getting ready to go head-to-head with Zara. And you can tell that, like, they're like really wrapping this up in the way that it deserves, ultimately, And it's kind of insane to say that, like, the show has been around for 7 years. It premiered in 2018 on YouTube Red. It's been a part of my life for 5 years now. And, man, it's kind of crazy how, to me, the biggest thing about this one is that it's yet another kind of television institution that was a very big part of a section of my life that is now over. And I'm going to feel the same way when Stranger Things ends later this year. So yeah, just walk me through, because again, this is another thing. I don't know if you and I have talked a whole lot about Cobra Kai, as far as its impact on you, what it's meant to you.
No, we definitely haven't, because I hadn't. Look, my first exposure to the Karate Kid, as you can imagine, was the Jaden Smith Jackie Chan movie in 2010. And I didn't watch the originals until I decided I want to watch Cobra Kai, so I'm going to watch the originals. Do not talk to me about the next Karate Kid. That is an awful movie.
Yeah, there's a reason why I never watched that one, or Karate Kid 3 in the original Karate Kid.
But the first one is a classic 80s Rocky type movie.
Directed by the same director as Rocky too. So
exactly. That's why I made the Rocky. I watched the Rocky movies like pretty close. It was around when Creed 3 was coming out.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Second one was all right. I didn't mind the third one because I knew like Terry Silver was going to show up in the show. And then I watched the show, semi binged it. Like, I thought it's the corniest thing ever.
Exactly.
but
But it
it's
knows
great.
it.
But
But
it's
it
great.
knows that it's
It
corny.
knows it, and it's like, oh my god, karate, it's life or death. Like,
Yes.
but they fully embrace it. Season 5 was probably the weakest
Yeah.
of the
In
5,
hindsight, it was the weakest.
but then I don't know. I just kind of missed the TV releases. Like, they dumped like 5 episodes all at once. Like, slow down.
Yeah.
Like, give me one at a time.
Again, things have reversed. We've gotten used to having an episode at a time. Like, part of the reason why everybody's going nuts over Severance right now is because they're airing an episode at a time. You know, same with Invincible and Yellowjackets and all these
I would
other
like
shows.
to say that the Netflix executives are seeing that, but one of them just said that Oppenheimer would have the same effect. It was released on Netflix, so I don't think the lights are on upstairs.
Well, remember, according
to
according to Zack Snyder, more people watched Rebel Moon Part 1 than they did Barbie.
because there's 2 people watching every time. Like,
Yes.
But I need to catch up on the show because
yeah.
It's a very highly enjoyable show. It's not high art.
Very enjoyable. Exactly.
Yeah.
You always know what you're going to get. They always deliver consistency wise, and it's fun. It's good fun. And the fact that, again, for me, the highlight is seeing how far Jolo's come from being like the skinny kid that he was in that first season to now he's Blue Beetle. And also, again, is killing it right now. So he actually also, ironically, I don't know if you saw. Oh no, you only saw the first episode, but he also. Well, no, he was the first episode.
He
had
the
the two voiceovers.
The Declaration
of Independence. Both of them. He voices both the twins. So in the first episode of Invincible. So yeah, Jolo's killing it right now. And it's funny, like kind of all the revelations. Tanner Buchanan and Mary Mauser, who portray Robbie and Tori, respectively. Not Tori. Oh my God. Sam. Wow, can't believe I was getting that mixed up. Respectively, are engaged now. For me, it was still the funniest thing seeing Peyton List from Jesse, watching that back in the day as Tori.
I love
that
Jesse.
guy.
Jesse's like a great top 5 Disney Channel show.
Yeah, obviously, again, seeing the journey that what's it called? That Hawk and Dimitri have been on all the way through. Kenny, oh man, all these characters that we've come to know, all the legacy characters that they brought back from Karate Kid that are staples of the show. Terry Silver, Chosen, Mike Barnes, so many different people. They even brought back Elizabeth Shue for the one episode at the end of season 3. How again, just it never ceases to amaze me just how far into the Karate Kid realm the show is able to dip. Literally, I was worried to a point where I'm like, okay, are they going to bring back Hilary Swank? But from what I've heard, they're like, no, we're leaving next Karate Kid out of this. That's not part of the universe.
Please don't.
So, yeah, it's still, and I know I've mentioned this so many times before, so it's kind of run itself into the ground. But still, the funniest thing to me is the fact that Ralph Macchio is a couple months older than Thomas Ian Griffith, who portrays Terry Silver. Like, that's still the funniest thing to me of all time. But overall, the biggest thing that I can say about it is that it didn't go out with a bang. It didn't go out with a whimper. But overall, Cobra Kai, it had a very consistent run, which is more than I can say about most TV shows. I'm very, very happy for its impact that it had both on the culture and on myself. And this is going to be one of those shows that I'm going to miss when it is finally over. When I do,
it's one of the premier legacy sequel projects.
Yes. That we've been talking about. That has kind of taken over TV.
Creed and this, and we probably do a whole episode about the best legacy projects.
Exactly. Also, again, it follows the strict rule of TV spinoff / legacy anything is that it has to start off as a joke. Again, the whole impetus for the show started as a long-running joke on How I Met Your Mother when Barney Stinson said, oh, the hero of the Karate Kid is Johnny Lawrence. And I'm pretty sure the creators of the show were writers on How I Met Your Mother at the time. So that kind of ended up taking off, the same way that Better Call Saul started as a joke in the Breaking Bad writers' room. So again, that is the rule for great TV spinoff sequels. They have to start as a joke somewhere. So that's kind of, so again, How I Met Your Mother is just as big of a reason for the show's existence as the original Karate Kid movie. So that's kind of, again, one of the other kind of weird facets about the show that's always fun. But yeah, like I said, it's a damn good one, consistent all the way through. I give this one mad credit. So before we wrap up and get out of here, we also had the premiere of another legacy IP show of the last couple of years. Started out as a COVID project where they were like, Mike White, we need you to shoot something all in one location for relatively cheap. He was like, I've got this script about a bunch of rich people at a resort in Hawaii and shenanigans happen. And it kind of ended up becoming the biggest thing that came out of summer of 2021 and has now spawned not one, but 2 follow-up series. They pursued an anthology model where each season hosts a entirely new cast of characters, with the exception of one legacy character who they'll kind of jump over from season to season. I'm talking, of course, about White Lotus. Like I said, so they brought back Jennifer Coolidge's character from season 1 into season 2 when they went to Sicily, and now that they're in season 3 in Thailand, they brought back Natasha Rothwell's character from season 1, as well as a surprise reveal at the end of season 1 that Greg, Tanya's boo and later husband in seasons 1 and 2, is also revealed to be in this season as well. So I'm probably speaking a bunch of gobbledygook because you have not seen White Lotus,
I'm
correct?
just picturing Greg from Succession.
I know, right?
Moment.
That would be hysterical. So essentially, the way that I describe and pitch White Lotus to people is that it is murder mystery meets commentary on class, because it's always about a bunch of rich assholes who are kind of going through their own micro melodramas, usually about 3 or 4 different groups at these various different kind of White Lotus resort hotels all across the world. Like I said, season 1 is Hawaii, these luxury resorts. Season 1 is Hawaii, season 2 is Sicily, and now season 3, they're in Thailand. And it's always a host of different casts. As well as, so like I said, murder mystery, class commentary, and what I like to call vacation porn, because they like to just really show off like the crazy, exotic locales, essentially. So the first season, you have a cast consisting of Connie Britton, Steve Zahn, Jake Lacey, Alexander Daddario, Sydney Sweeney, Fred Heckinger, and Murray Bartlett as as the hotel manager. And Jennifer Coolidge, right? The introduction of her. Season 2, you bring back Jennifer Coolidge, and then you've got the new cast, which consists of Aubrey Plaza, Theo James, Will Sharp, Michael Imperioli, F. Murray Abraham, Haley Lou Richardson, and a couple other people. The Italian girl Simona Tabasco, who would later appear in another Sydney Sweeney movie, Immaculate, ironically enough. But so you have those 2 casts for the first season, and now you're following them in Thailand, and this might be the most loaded cast that they have yet. Like I said, similarly structured to the start of the first 2 seasons, where again, the opening scene of the episode is a murder that takes place, and then you cut to however many months, weeks earlier, 1 week earlier in this case, where you see all of our main characters coming to the island. So like I said, you have Natasha Rothwell's character who reprises the role of Belinda from the first season. And so you have 3 new sets of characters. You have a rich dude and his significantly younger girlfriend, portrayed by Walton Goggins and Amy Lou Wood of Sex Education. You have a family comprised of Jason Isaacs and Parker Posey as the parents, and then the children are played respectively by Sarah Catherine Hook, Patrick Schwarzenegger, and Sam Nivola. So a couple of legacy figures there. And then you have what's it called? And then you have, as Luke has disappeared for the time being, and then you have the third set, which are 3 best friends portrayed by Michelle Monaghan, Carrie Coon, and Leslie Bibb. So they're kind of all have come to the resort. And like I said, shenanigans will, I'm sure, ensue. They started to hint at and set up some of the plot lines, but that's essentially the premise that you have for White Lotus. It's always kind of what I'll say. It's always interesting to watch, but certain seasons are better than others. It really depends on kind of how much you can kind of engage with the characters, because the thing that the kind of tightrope balancing act line that they always have to do is you're like, oh, all these characters are rich, so naturally you're not supposed to like any of them. But it always kind of walks this tightrope walking line as far as like, oh, like watching rich people's like kind of melodrama is always like kind of fascinating to watch from like this show within a show TV point, like from the commentary of the begrudged and exhausted, overly exhausted, workers at these hotels who are forced to cater and create this experience for people, So that's kind of always where the interest comes in. Have you had any interest to watch White Lotus recently?
I have, and the way you describe it, it is a little Knives Out reminiscent of rich people, murder mystery, class commentary. Yes. But in TV show format.
Yes,
so
TV show formats, you have more time to get to know each of these characters. And like I said, it really depends. Season 1 didn't work for me because the problem is that they're trying to make you feel sorry. That the majority of the action is centered around the Murray Bartlett character. And they're trying to make you feel sorry for him. But it's one of those things where A, I don't think Murray Bartlett is that good of an actor. But also B, it's the fact that they try to make that character feel sympathetic, but that character is arguably just as shitty as the rest of the characters who you're following. And the fact that Jake Lacey, who is an asshole, but does have legitimate beef with Murray Bartlett, which winds up, again, the murder, and the way that they kind of build up to it is kind of stupid. But in season 2, I think they have a much better grasp of it. I think the storylines are much more well balanced. The humor, I think, is much, much better. And kind of the build up to the end with all the different respective storylines, I think I just find much more interesting. And so if season 2 was definitely focused on like the sex of it, season 3 this season is definitely focused on kind of like the mysticism of it. You know, how the whole impetus behind it that kind of differentiates this season and this resort from the last two is that they're like, yeah, they are a wellness retreat. They are here. You are here to kind of forget all of the, you know, your problems and your woes from the outside world. The characters are incentivized to give up their electronics, so that you know that always results in certain interesting things. So
Back to the dark ages.
exactly. Standouts for me so far this season, Walt Goggins, Carrie Coon, obviously, who's one of my already one of my favorite all-time actors, Jason Isaacs, Parker Posey, and also it's cool having Natasha Rothwell back as well as kind of the continuing to kind of tie the threads of the show together, even though it's supposed to be kind of a reset, different location, different set of characters every time. So
you have a Mission Impossible alumni in there. Michelle Monaghan.
Michelle Monaghan. Wow.
Yeah.
Brain fart, major brain fart there. So yeah, exactly. A Mission Impossible alumni. You've got an MCU alumni as well with Leslie Bibb going all the way back to the first Iron Man.
And Walton Goggins, his
and Carrie Coon,
in
Carrie Coon, who is the voice of Proxima Midnight in Infinity War. So yeah, like I said, you've got a lot of reasons. So like I said, and the cool thing about White Lotus is, again, it is all primary anthology. So aside from them reusing characters from previous seasons, you really don't need to have watched the first 2 seasons in order to kind of watch and know what's going on with each season, especially since, like I said, this is the second time now where they've had a particularly similar setup where, again, opening scene, one of the characters discovers a dead body, flashback to however long ago, and the rest of the season you're going to be following throughout in order to see kind of the lead up and who is the dead body. And they always do that thing where it's like you're trying to figure out who the dead body is, but they cut it in such a way where you can't really tell who it is. So there's that. So I'm going to be interested already, following the storylines, theorizing who it's going to be, where the storylines are going to go. Obviously, they've already set us up for a lot of drama. So there is kind of all of that. So with that being said, that's really it. That's kind of everything that we have to talk about. All the new TV shows. We'll be covering Severance in a couple of weeks. Next week, like I said, we're focusing primarily on Talkin Lost. And like I said, so going forward throughout the rest of the year, like I said, we're going to be doing Talkin Lost. And we're going to take it week by week, case by case basis in terms of seeing whether the movies are going to warrant their own individual reviews. We're probably definitely going to do one for Mickey 17 for sure, especially since that's also the week that Daredevil premieres as well. So we may do so we're probably going to do a separate episode where we cover Mickey 17 and Daredevil in addition to our Lost episode as well. So that's really it. That's everything that we've covered. Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. I wasn't happy with the Captain America video. I took it down. The YouTube algorithm.
Really?
The YouTube algorithm took it. It pushed it and it got nothing. So I thought, okay, I need to rework some stuff in my videos. But the next one is gonna be a banger. I think I'm covering the 7 most likely films to win the box office and see.
That'll be a good one.
See what chance each one has. And at the end, I'm basically gonna say, okay, but it's gonna be Avatar. Like no one
exactly.
No one really
it's gonna be Avatar.
chance,
like nobody else has a chance.
But I want to look at like what factors might come into play.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Honestly, I'd be interested to see that. That'll be good. Definitely let me know when that.
It's not very in depth, but it just from my perspective, how I see it.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So and of course you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts later on today. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film and watch more fucking movies, or in this case, movies and TV. We'll see you guys next week for season 2 premiere, Talkin Lost.